I think we'll start now. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everybody who's come to this public meeting of the Socialist Labour Network. I'm Esther Giles, Steering Committee member. I'm honoured to be chairing this important meeting. The people are the resistance, and we have lots of people here this evening. All over the UK, the people face a pit of financial doom. Money savings, such as turning your heating thermostat down or removing some items from your shopping basket, is not going to fix this problem. People are saying enough is enough, won't pay. And workers are striking, dock workers, rail workers, train drivers, postal workers, refuse workers, BT workers, many workers on the front line, to whom we're all grateful during the pandemic and who demonstrated who it is that really keeps things going for us. At the same time, we see attacks on our freedoms, including the right to protest. So we will hear this evening from international and local activists. We will hear about resistance and renewal. We will hear about attacks on the right to protest. We will hear about local action and organising. We will hear what the people, not the Labour Party, are doing. So for our first speaker, Chatoa Gunathilaka. Chatoa is from the Frontline Socialist Party of Sri Lanka, and a lot of us will have heard about the action that's been taking place in Sri Lanka. And Chatoa, we're really pleased to have you here this evening. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade. Thank you for having me here as well. And it is a pleasure to talk and share what kind of experience that we are having in Sri Lanka as well. So in related to today's discussion, so I'm going to mainly focus on Sri Lankan matter, and because I think that many people in the panel will be talking about the situation in in the UK. So everybody knows that there was a huge uprising in Sri Lanka, and it was a successful one, even though it was a unorganized, spontaneous uprising. It was a successful one, but that didn't happen suddenly. Of course, people all around the world saw that as a sudden uprising, but I think in Sri Lanka, the whatever protest and the struggles happening throughout the number of years, like 1-2 decades before, I think influenced this struggle as well, especially the teachers' struggle in 2021. It was a very successful one. They've been fighting for their pay rise for 24 years, but they couldn't win it. But in 2021, within like 8-9 months time, throughout there are, I think, around 100 teachers and principal unions. So they got together, regardless of the political parties they are affiliated with, and they won the struggle. So I think that influenced massively in this uprising as well. And even before that, Sri Lanka has a very strong history of fighting in the student movement as well. Like for like 30-40 years, Inter-University Student Federation is very strong movement in Sri Lanka, and they've been fighting for free education and things like that, and as well as the other matters related to the country as well. So they, for example, one struggle they did, they started in 2008 actually, because government wanted to bring a private medical university. They've been fighting for 9 years with many difficulties, and in 2018, after 9 years, they won it. So I think this uprising had that influence from those struggles. I just got 2 examples, but there were many like that. So especially leftist movement did try to keep that struggles going on as well. So I just wanted to mention before we start going through the struggle. So as you know that then when that uprising come up, there were main 2 slogans first at the beginning. One was like Gota go home. That means Gota is the name of the president. and president has to go. And the other one is no to 225. So when we talk about these two slogans, um, Gota go home means because we have an executive presidency in the country. I think that is the most powerful position in the whole world, I think, because even though it's a small country, he can do anything even what he wants. So Gota go home means that people, if you try to understand politically, that means that people wanted to get rid of this executive presidency position as well because they had enough in the last, like since 1977, 78. So, and the other thing is no to 225. That means we have 225 parliament members. So that was a very famous slogan as well, because that means that since the so-called independence in 1948, we had enough experience with these governments, capitalist governments coming and rotating here and there every 4 or 5 years. So that when they say that no to 225, that means this whole political the system, that parliament and this representative system also they refused. So that means that people wanted to have a kind of a completely different solution for their to find solution for their day-to-day problems. And then later on, those with the involvement of the, because it was as I said earlier, unorganized, spontaneous one, but the minute that it happened, the left movements got involved, even though left is weak, but they involved as much as possible, and then tried to deviate those slogans into the revolutionary side, like power back to people, power beyond the parliament, and getting a new people's constitution written by people. So now at this moment, these slogans are very popular. So what I wanted to tell you that of course, these people are the opposition. I would like to say that it's not only people are opposition. I think people should be the driving force of the country as well. So I think rather than opposing and the resisting things, I think we need to go a step forward and find a movement to go forward and take decisions on behalf of us well. So that is what actually we are now trying in Sri Lanka. We achieved a lot in this struggle. For example, after having majority votes, the president became the president in Sri Lanka 2019. But we could get rid of him around 2.5 years time, and we had a very strong government with a 2/3 majority. But within 2 years time, we managed to get rid of him as well, the government as well. So it was a big achievement. But now what has happened? Yes, of course, we changed it, but now within the political parliament, they still managed to run the government. They managed to establish another government with a new president who has no mandate at all. He lost his own seat in the parliament, and because of the bonus seat, only one bonus seat he got for his party, he managed to come into the parliament, and now he became the president of the country. And it's nothing else but just because of he's a good protector of previous regime, and the previous government still has the majority of the seat in the parliament. So because of that, actually he became the president, and now he has unleashed a huge repression on the protesters. Now actually they are using the Terrorism Act, Prevention of Terrorism Act, to arrest students and keeping them in detention centers without producing to the courts. So that is what is happening, because earlier they were using this Public Property Act and so such acts to put them behind bars, because according to our law, if the damage is more than 100,000 rupees, the judges cannot bail them out. So they've been abusing that, but judges started asking, because this is a public, massive people struggle, how can you pick 1 or 2 people? So now they are using the Prevention of Terrorism Act to not to produce those who they wanted to detain without producing, then they can keep that like 90 days, up to 90 days without producing to the court. Now the convener of Inter-University Student Federation and other two are already there. So they haven't been produced to the court now, I think 11, 12 days. So the president has signed that. So that is the situation. So when we come to, there's a huge repression. And on the other side, people's problems are still there. Like now, these days, the budget proposals are going on. And if you look at the budget proposal for the next year, 15% of the expenses has been allocated for defense, like military and the and police. So we have no war in Sri Lanka. There is no civil war or any other war. But why they allocate like 15% of the expenses to defense when they like that is 488 billion rupees. But when you think about schools and health, for schools they have allocated only 139. For public transport, only 38 billion. Just imagine, we are in a the big problem with fuel and everything. We need to promote public transport, but instead they are allocating 37 billion for public transport and 488 for military, because they know there is a war coming with the people, nothing else. So they are getting ready for that. So you can imagine the repression they are planning. So that is the situation. Like when once in an interview with the Economist magazine, Ranil Wickremesinghe said that his plan is to going for deep cuts in social benefits and privatizing all the assets, remaining assets, state assets as well. And when he name it, those some assets actually some proper assets are profiting. Like for example, insurance corporation is profiting. Like last year, it had 100 billion recorded profit, but still they wanted to privatize, because that they wanted to do anything that IMF and all the monetary organizations are putting forward. They want to go in that direction. So what I wanted to tell that is that even though that the uprising cannot see on the top like earlier, like few months ago, 2 months ago in July, but still the problems are same. People are suffering. People are dying without medicine. So their problems are there, that their pain is still there. People will rise up. Very soon they will rise up in one way or other. But I think I believe that the majority of the people here should be leftist people. But I think that we as left should organize them when they come, when they come forward. That is where the lacking part is. I think everywhere all around the world, that is left is too weak to organize those people. So what I want to tell before I finish my initial thoughts is that, as I said earlier, of course, the people are the opposition. We have to organize people. We have to bring the resistance against the all these things that their governments are doing against the people. But I think we need to go one step beyond as well, and we should start building movements, revolutionary movements in every country. Then only we can actually bring a solution to the people. Because what will happen if you just promote the our opposition and our resistance, it will end up in a regime change. That is what been happening for many countries. But we need to instead of happening that, if you really want to bring the real change into the people, including in the UK, I think we should start a revolutionary movement that can mobilize people and direct people in this kind of uprisings and things like that. So I'm going to finish my initial thoughts in like this, and if there is any other question, because I didn't go to examples and what happened in Sri Lanka and things like that. If somebody is interested, then I will try to explain more. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Chatura. So next, having heard those exhortations from Chatura, the people will rise up, the people are the resistance, of course, and we need to build a movement in every country And clearly that's a discussion that we're having because it's only the people that are the resistance now. We're going to move on now to Aman. He's a worker activist, one of the leading members of Iran's Hekmaty's party. Aman's been a member of Unison since the mid-1990s and is currently a member of UCU. So Aman, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to follow Chaitra and just be as brief as possible. I think what we actually are seeing in here to a large extent is the issue of the protests which have been taking place in Iran. Let me just concentrate on Iran very sort of briefly. The situation in the country is one of larger scale protests. On average, over the last few years, we've had around 10 to 12 protest movements every day, if we count the year to be 365 days. Protests have been taking place across a variety of workplaces, spread across areas of teachers, nurses. In addition to factories, we have had it across the areas that you would tend to see not very much in many places. For example, pensioners, coming out on protest movements, and wide and larger scale protests for a variety of issues. Probably the most important issue, which has been the center across the whole country, has been on the basis of life and standards of life. With a country that we have, at least officially, roughly over 40% inflation, inability to be able to pay for a variety of basic needs across the country. This has been one major issue. Issue of welfare is the second one. And obviously the situation of the government and its inability to be able to manage the scenario other than showing a repressive force. This has been the outcome of what we have been seeing in the country. There is one thing which probably makes it different, because I think insofar as living standards is concerned and protests taking place, that's probably not restricted to Iran at all. It's not only in the whole region, but we can see it now with the situation of economically everywhere else. These are growing, and polarization is becoming more and more across the whole, I think most of the countries across the world. The situation in Iran and the difference probably between that and the other countries is the political consciousness, which is different. What we're seeing is larger scale formation of mass assemblies as a means of workplaces. In a country where unions and workers' organizations are effectively illegal, the general tendency that we see is that everywhere mass assemblies are being formed, and the people who work in that area or in that sector, they tend to get together and they make decisions to protest. And this is growing, what we call the movement of general assemblies. To a large extent, these tend to be formed into councils of workers in different workplaces, or even, as I said, within pensioners or within teachers and within nurses, etc. We see very similar pattern forming across the country. This has been the case, which has started several years ago, but what we have seen in the past year or year and a half is the growth of this movement. A growth of the movement that is actually forming a form of opposition, in the sense that it is not just the case that the state is incapable, but it's formation of an alternative to the state as it is. And the call for these assemblies or councils, or if you like to refer to the old Russian name of Soviets in a way, are being actually propagated much, much more than ever before. There is one other issue which is in Iran, which is probably different from some other countries in the region, is the case that nobody has any doubt that the fault is laying all the time with the issue of the state. Anything that goes wrong or anything which is not acceptable, automatically everybody says the problem is that of the state. It's the Islamic Republic which is at fault. And this shows itself in all sorts of areas, whether we're looking at the payment of salaries, lack of welfare, to anything else. This is the norm across the society. Perhaps this makes Iran one of the only countries where you don't have to expose the state. The state is automatically exposed. And everybody knows this, and it happens everywhere. Everybody knows the fault is with the state. It's the case of the ability to be able to push the state back, which is the major issue. Insofar as the work of the Islamic Republic is concerned, probably you all are aware of all the talks that is talking about the nuclear issue of the contacts, and obviously the meeting which has been taking place in Vienna and other places, trying to find out a way to manage, or what they call to rein in the Islamic Republic with the issue of the building of atomic bomb or any form of atomic energy. Now, this is a whole farcical insofar as the society is concerned. Let me tell you how it actually works in terms of the society. The society sees it in one way. They say, if it is the case that it is possible to reach some sort of an agreement that the economic embargo can be taken away, this is good news. But it's not seen as a good news from the point of view of the Islamic Republic reaching an agreement. It's seen as a good news from the point of view that the Islamic Republic and the bosses are not able to use the issue of economic embargo to combat any protests. From that point of view, that's actually growing. Second point is that soon as any indication of any chance of a change in the situation with the economic embargo is concerned, automatic answer is, well, where is our share? If it is the case that there is going to be an opening, where is our share? So in effect, this is also an addition to the protests which are taking place. If the state used to use the excuse that because of economic embargo, the situation is like this, whereas everybody knows it's not the lack of finances, it's not the lack of money, but it's actually been used as an excuse. The automatic outcome over the past month, where there was indications of reaching an agreement, the protests have actually grown, and they have said, well, if it is the case that there is opening, if there is trade, if there is any issue of investment, then in that case, where is our share? We want to have a share of the better life. So again, that is working against the state as it is. There is growth in the protest in variety of means. We have had major strike action by over 100,000 workers in the petrochemical and oil industries. The state managed to push it down to some extent with some promises of changes. That has not worked. There have been protests again growing up. For example, even tomorrow, there is a big call for protests of the workers in the oil industry to go on a mass demonstration in the capital, Tehran, and across other cities. And this is a very, very similar pattern of what we see in all industries. As I said, looking at sort of 10 to 12 protests taking place daily, the ability of the state to repress it is not very much. So there is a growth to the extent that even last week, the huge pressure was against the government for changes in terms of social status. Women in Iran are considered by the Islamic Republic to be not the second, not the third, probably the fifth rank in terms of citizenship. There have been protests, and they have pushed it back to the state that the government has currently said, well, anybody who decides to do anything about the issue of women is probably doing it on their own, and it's not something that the state wanted. They opened up, for example, for the first time again, the stadiums being open to women, and they are trying to sit back. All the time we see a sort of a retreat from the Islamic Republic in the face of the protests. This is growing. What we have got in here at the moment is not the question of whether the Islamic Republic is reaching an end of its life, which everybody can see. And secondly, it's not a question whether the state is on a retreat, which we can see. And there is no doubt that the number of arrests and effectively kidnapping individuals across the society has grown to the extent that Iran is now one of the biggest countries in terms of holding the number of prisoners. All of this is taking place. But what we're seeing at the same time, the question is the extent that the working class, the extent of the general protests move in the direction that they say enough is enough, but they are able to form and unite in formation of their councils in the way that what the alternative is. So we have got effectively in Iran a battle of alternatives. the right wing who tries to actually hand over from the top, and we have got the down or below the society in terms of the left that is pushing for the idea of the councils of people and the representatives to be the actual people who control the society and run the society. This is the battle of the alternatives we have in the country. And from that point of view, it is, in a way, a very exciting time, but at the same time, I always say it's a very frightening time, because the way or the extent that we can push it forward, and when I say we, I mean in terms of the general opposition to the Islamic Republic from the left, the extent that they can push it forward, and the battle against obviously the Islamic Republic and that of the right wing who wants a handover effectively from the top without changing any of the status of affairs. This is what is actually taking place, and this is what makes the country in a very, very polarized manner. So we're seeing higher and higher levels of polarization. We're seeing a broader and broader change of the battle of alternatives, and the extent that one can get against the other would really is the issue that we see as a class struggle in Iran. One other example probably would be good, that while for example, we see it from the Middle East, Israel, US, and the right-wing media that's saying that the Islamic Republic is, for example, against Israel or is pushing for its own forces across the region. At the same time, we see in the general public in the streets, the idea that one, the Islamic Republic forces must be all withdrawn from the region. Peace is what people want. Three, the decision of controlling this is the slogan that is forward. It's nothing to do with the different type of forces, but the most important issue is who takes the political power and how well we can organize in order to achieve that. I think I tried to do it within 10 minutes. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Aman. That's fascinating. I think that's really appreciated to see that tension between the Islamic State and the People's Assemblies and the right wing. Different to what Chhattoor has described when he was talking about the huge military expenditure, which is intended to suppress the people. So these are amazing instabilities that we're seeing here breaking out all over, but being manifested in different ways. So one of the things, Aman, that you mentioned was the suppression of protest. We've now got video from Ammar Kazmi about attacks on the right to protest. Ammar is an anti-imperialist political activist. He can't join us this evening, but he sent us this video so that we can watch it now. He previously worked on Jeremy Corbyn's 2016 leadership campaign and has also worked in Parliament. So now we're going to have a look at the video from Ammar Kazmi. Over to our technical expert.
With me, everybody.
Thank you, Becky.
Comrades, thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you today. I regret profoundly that I'm unable to join you live, but I'm incredibly busy helping to organize a large event due to take place tomorrow, so please accept my apologies. My name is Ammar Kazmi. I'm a law master's student, and I'm going to be speaking briefly about some of the growing attacks on the right to protest here in Britain, and why, despite the fact that these attacks are disconcerting, I don't think that that should necessarily be our chief concern when it comes to the growing social unrest here in our country. Now, as we all know, there's been an increasing level of anti-democratic manoeuvring in Britain, particularly over the past 10 years, and especially so over the previous few years as the Conservative Party has shifted ever more rightward. I take a broad view on what I mean by the word protest. We should be in absolutely no doubt that taking industrial action, for example, going on strike, is a form of protest. It's a form of protest against one's working and living conditions, as well as being a method of bargaining and negotiation. And that's why, in my view, the Trade Union Act 2016 is a clear example of an attack on the right to protest. And it was designed to further cripple the ability of trade unions to take their members out on strike. And that built on legislation from the Thatcher era. That being said, we have recently witnessed numerous inspiring actions that have seen the once difficult 50% vote threshold being reached. And that really goes to show just how bad things now are when union after union is successfully balloting for strike action with high turnouts from their members and high percentages of votes to embark on industrial action. And that's spooked the Tories, and it's why Liz Truss wants to now go even further than the 2016 Act. It bears remembering that the 2016 Act was lambasted by the Tory MP David Davis as being like something out of Franco's Spain. Well, if the 2016 Act was like Franco's Spain, then the new legislation being touted must be akin to something much worse than that. Truss wants to raise the 50% threshold even further and guarantee minimum service commitments during strikes, which would practically legalize slave labor of one kind, and it would kneecap the effectiveness of taking strike action. And so Mick Lynch was absolutely correct when he said that it would represent the biggest attack on trade union and civil rights since labor unions were legalized in 1871. We also recently saw the enactment of the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022, enacted after the culture war furore of Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020. That act contains a provision to increase the minimum sentence for damage to a memorial from 3 months to 10 years. It widens stop and search powers. It allows the police to place even further restrictions on our right of public assembly. And we're also seeing a broadening of the definition of extremism to potentially include direct action groups like Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and Palestine Action. So, this is part of a trend. Whenever we find effective methods to protest, the Tory government finds ways to smash them. So if we're, taking industrial action, the government will try to simply outlaw it. If we're taking direct action or we're mobilizing effectively in the streets, the government will simply make it illegal. So this means that we have to, consider what our position on legality is and what our position on the law is. And I don't think we can really place any hope on these laws changing, at least in the short to medium term. Obviously, we don't passively accept them. It's incumbent on us to expose these outrages, to campaign against them. However, we have to remember that we have such a compliant, such a collaborative so-called opposition that it isn't realistic to place much hope in parliamentary defiance. So how do we confront this? And I think, largely has to be a matter of bravery. We can open the history books and we can read about countless people who took direct action, who engaged in civil disobedience, who campaigned for what was right, whilst, yes, breaking the law. And they made history, not only because of their resistance, but because more often than not, the law ended up agreeing with them. It ended up catching up with them. And those people instituted social change. But the thing is, it's very easy to say, but it requires a level of discipline and organization, because these actions in history have not been random. They've been planned by groups of people who had, at least some kind of theoretical understanding about what they were doing. They had some avenues to which they could propagate the importance of their protests and ultimately capture public sympathy and imagination. And what I fear about this juncture in history, and what I think has to concern us more than the finer details of the legislation passing through Parliament, is the sheer level of randomness, the lack of coordination, and incoherence of what I imagine much of the unrest, which I think is coming, is going to look like. Because that is the sort of illegal action that makes history for the wrong reasons and actually leads to regression rather than progression. So take, for example, the England riots in 2011. They began for a perfectly moral reason. It was in outrage at the unjust and racist police murder of Mark Duggan, a 29-year-old black man. But when that anger had nowhere tangible to go, it degenerated from violent clashes with the police to arson and looting. And I don't say that to moralize about it, because I agree with Martin Luther King Jr., that the riot is the language of the unheard. But what that led to was ruthless state suppression and 24-hour courts, where lots of poor working class people had their lives ruined through brutal prosecutions that ultimately didn't do anything to achieve positive social change. Now, whether there will be riots or not is something that I don't think anyone can predict. But even if things don't get that bad, I think it's unavoidable that people will be pushed to begin taking matters into their own hands. And how are we going to capture that momentum and that energy as the left? Now, the cynic in me says that we ourselves are so disorganized, divided, distracted, that we are not going to be the leaders of what is going to come. It's going to be other forces. And so in this precarious position in which the right to protest is being eroded and we have no parliamentary opposition, we on the left need to have some frank discussions and to, at the very least, gain an understanding of the forces at play here. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't believe in hopeless cynicism, but I also don't believe in unfounded optimism. And so we need to take a sober look at this, a clear-eyed look at this, and hopefully try to build some common fronts amongst ourselves. The Don't Pay campaign, I think, is an interesting example of people taking the initiative to get organized, but I still wonder how far campaigns like that will necessarily take us to where we ideally need to be. So I don't pretend to give you any definitive answers, but I offer you, at the very least, some food for thought. And I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky. We're going to go to Ed now, and then we're going to go to Newham. There is one Q&A, and if the panelists that have spoken so far can look at the question in the Q&A, we'll ask you to respond to that before we move to the Newham refuse workers. So over to you, Ed, now.
Esther, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the opportunity and giving us this platform. I didn't realise I was actually going to be in such prestige international company, but hey, it's a tough act to follow. So thank you very much. So look, my name's Ed Baldwin. I'm political officer for the Kent Invicta branch CWU. I'm also a workplace representative, and just want to give you our outtake on the current dispute. And for us to actually do that, I need to just give you a little bit of background on Raw Mill, Post Office and GPO. For 500 years, Raw Mill, as we know it today, has been servicing the good citizens of this green and pleasant land. And it wasn't up until 1969 that the GPO ceased to be the government department. The corporation was split into two divisions, post and telecommunications. And it was here that these two stalwarts of our society become distant businesses for the first time, although still under the umbrella of the Post Office. Now, for nearly 12 years, they ran side by side, and it wasn't until 1981 when Thatcher's governments introduced the Telecommunication Act, which meant that the telephones side of the industry lost its monopoly to supply every single home in the UK. By 1984, the sell-off was complete and the birth of BT began. Now, BT is one of the most profitable companies in the UK. And this year at BT, we saw the profits of £1.3 billion earned, and a dividend payment of £758 million paid to his shareholders. Now, many of its staff, some work in call centres, some in the facilities, earn less than the UK average wage. And their call for a cost of living pay rise has fallen on deaf ears, but not for its CEO. Philip Jensen was awarded a 32% pay rise, and that is works out 113 times more than its employees, according to Employer, who's an online platform for HR consultants. Now, in June this year, it was discovered that a food bank was set up in Tyneside call centre. Now, BT denied that this happened, and called it a community pantry. Look, Andy Carr, the Deputy General Secretary for the Telecom side of the CW, announced the strike dates, and since those dates were announced, Mr. Jensen has gone missing, refusing to engage with the CW and turning down media invites. Again, bunker politics. For the postal side, it was to be another 30 years before we saw the privatisation. Prior to that, the GPO, the Post Office, and now the Royal Mail, as it's called today, continued to bankroll the Treasury, funding new towns such as Telford, Milton Keynes. And for nearly 15 years, the government in the 90s and the noughties took a pension holiday. And there was plenty in Thatcher's government that wanted to sell off the postal side of the industry. But actually, it was Margaret Thatcher herself that stated that the Queen is not for sale and gave Royal Mail, the Post Office, a stay of execution. Sadly, it was New Labour that brought the discussion back to Parliament. Peter Manderson's proposals were rejected first, Parcel Force, and then Royal Mail stating that the pension holiday that the both parties took in that time would be too costly. In 2010, the Conservative manifesto stated that it would sell off Royal Mail, and by now the final salary pension had finished, and the coalition led by Vince Cable sold off its final stake in 2014. City Analysis stated at the time that Royal Mail was sold 2 billion short of its market price, despite the protests of the hundreds and millions of signatures for petitions and the CW People's Post campaign. Royal Mail have made nearly £5 billion in profit since 2013. 2021, Royal Mail announced a 611 million profit, and in 2022, 758 million pounds profit. And in the last 12 months, it's paid over £500 million in dividends to its shareholders. This year, it's imposed a 2% pay increase to its employers and offering between 0 and 1% to our cleaners. Now, once upon a time, on a Thursday night, they clapped us and they called us heroes during a pandemic. The morning after, the same organisation now called us greedy, lazy, unpatriotic, and that we need to work harder. In November last year, both Royal Mail and the CW signed up to an Agenda for Growth agreements, which involves Sunday working, clocking in and out, modernisation of new technology, automation, which would see the reduction of jobs within our industry, although it would be done through natural wastage and no compulsory redundance. In return, we, the CW, asked for a shorter working week. As early as January, Ofcom announced that the CW and the Royal Mail were working together. Chairman Simon Thompson went on a national tour praising our members' progress. Both he and the Deputy General Secretary for Postal, Terry Bullinger, would do question and answer video links together and tell us how positive the future of Royal Mail is, sending the share price soaring. In February, Deputy General Secretary Terry wrote to Royal Mail seeking a quick cost of living pay increase with no strings attached, a deal which would protect our members from the spiralling day-to-day costs, a deal which would allow our members to provide the excellent service for which the CEO praised us just some 6 weeks earlier. Instead, we heard nothing. And it wasn't until April, end of April, did Royal Mail reply with an offer of 2% with strings which would remove shift allowance for working weekends, later delivery times up until 9 o'clock at night. Now, I don't know about you, I don't like answering the phone after 9 p.m. at night, let alone opening my front door. Flexi working, shorter hours in the summer, up to 50 hours during the peak time, weeks such as Christmas. Many of our posties do that already, but with the reward of overtime. those extra earnings to compensate for the basic pay of $22,700 a year. That's right, $5,300 less than the average UK wage, not the £30,000 a year the Royal Mail chairman Keith Williams claimed that posties are on. And now they plead poverty, the sound bites, the lies of £1 million a day, but continue to pay their bosses six-figure salaries with millions of pounds bonuses, and not forgetting £2 billion of shareholders dividend paid since 2013. And yet they tell us that we need to modernise. And we say enough is enough. And let me tell you my definition of what modernisation. The right for a fair day's wage after a fair day's work, that's modernisation. The right for the opportunity to see a doctor when I'm not feeling well, that's modernisation in a reasonable amount of time. And the affordability by having enough money in my pension pot without working to the day I die, that's modernisation. I'm going to make an assumption here. I believe that's your interpretation of modernisation to you. And if those at the top tell me that I can't have these things, then we will smash up this great British institution before they get another penny out of it. And to me, what has changed? What has inspired these bosses, their thinking? And I can only put that down to the events of what's happened at P&O. The lawyers, the bosses have all been inspired, and yet this government has done nothing to stop this. And now they bring this rot to us. So I'm going to conclude on this, comrades. Tony Benn once said to us that fuel is the progress of hope. Tony Benn once said to us that hope is the fuel of progress and fear is the cage that we put ourselves in. Change is coming, and we will put an end to this disease. What we've started to see now through the Enough's Enough campaign is not only trade unions united, but community leaders, religious leaders. People are in fear of paying nearly 25% of their annual earnings on energy alone. Change is coming. We will beat this. Solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ed. Enough is indeed enough. And we're going to hear a little bit later from some of those local campaigns, including Enough is Enough. Before we move on to Newham, I'm just going to pick up the question that we've got in the Q&A and see if Chatura or Aman want to answer. Do you have any suggestions, Chatura or Aman, about how best to engage with a wider public in order to unite and mobilise them? Do either of you want to answer that?
So I would like to share the experience, the activities that we do to do that. Like, for example, left is divided everywhere. So we had that experience for many years. But now what we are doing is we are trying to, rather than going to coalitions or something like that with leftist parties, what we are trying to do is work with them together. There are many differences in between parties. I think that is very important to just to start with, because I can see, because we are dealing with many leftist movements here as well, that we can see that some are, not ready to even talk to each other. So we need to come out of that, and we need to understand each other by action, not by the name or any other thing. So what we are doing there in Sri Lanka is that we are a small party, but we are trying to work with other progressive movements, then trade unions, leftist parties together, even though regardless of our differences, wherever we can work together. For example, if there is a trade union action that needs to be done, so for that purpose, we try to work together. Even we had a major split from our previous party in 2011, but even though we have many critics for them, we still talk to them as well to work together. So otherwise we can't win this. For example, the teachers' protest that I said earlier, because there are two main trade union centers in Sri Lanka. One actually around our party and other organizations. The other one is our split, our previous party. So when we both centers come together, it's a success. So, for example, 28th of March, there was through how can I say that, there was a hartal in 28th of March this year, and we both centers got together, and it was a very successful one for after many decades. So that is what we are trying to do in one side. Another thing is that when some unorganized spontaneous protest comes up, so rather than trying to put our banner in the front, so we genuinely go and work with them. As long as they are fighting for the right thing, we go there and we work with them and then make the connection with them. And then sometimes, even though in the table we have some differences in between groups, when we work together, we build up better understanding, and when we can start working together. So we have much success in that way. So I just wanted to add on to that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatura. I wonder, Aman, do you want to respond to that as well, about how we can organise?
Yeah,
get people organised.
Yeah, sure. I think that we got to recognise to some extent. Obviously, the most important thing is to building organizations that last. Organizations of the workers, and I think general assemblies, like councils, Soviets, where people can actually choose their representatives and put their points forward. That's one thing. I think the second thing, which is important, is to ensure that the differences are known. I think that's crucial. Not knowing what the differences are, it actually limits us. Knowing the differences in terms of what we want and what we want to act together and what we're going for. I think the most important thing for socialists everywhere is to make sure that, or recognize, one, that if it is the case that we want to move forward, we have to have our ideas, our socialist ideas put forward. That's what unites people. Socialist ideas do not disperse people, they unite people. Third, I think what is most crucial is to learn. There are huge amounts of learning. Just to give you one example, when it is the case that we see the protests that are taking place, dockers go on strike in Germany, dockers go on strike in UK, recognizing that they're both fighting for the rights to be able to actually determine their future, both being able to say, it doesn't matter if it is public sector, private sector, it's the duty of the state to ensure that the basic standards of everybody is there. And by putting that forward, by saying the socialist idea is not to say that we don't care. We care about everything. We care about the people on the homeless. We care about our posts. We care about our nurses. We care about our NHS. We care about education. We care about everything. If anything which happens in the society, the working class has got a say on it. And by actually forming the socialist ideas, that's the best way to mobilize and gather. The worst thing we can do is to sound the same as every other one. So it is crucial, a part of mobilization, to say what the socialists say, what do they want, what is their alternative, and I think that's what the basic heart of mobilization and what actually unites people in the long term together.
Thank you, Man. So really clear message about what unites us. And as Ed said, we need to break the system. We're going to go to Newham now. And we've got actually, before we go to Newham, we've got a very short video just to introduce the Newham workers. And Becky's on the case.
Just bear with me a moment, please.
And then we're going to go to Enrique. Yeah.
something up. The people on the lowest way. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now.
So there was a great turnout for the refuse workers strike in Newham, wasn't there, Henrique? Over to you.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's my first time on this group, and so far I'm enjoying it. Okay, let's talk about Newham. I feel like I'm in China or Moscow. You know, I always think UK is a free country, free of speech, but we had a letter telling us we're not allowed to talk to media. We're not allowed to talk anything against Newham. So if you guys go to Newham page on the Twitter, you're gonna see the poor message our mayor left there, trying to put public against us, but we can't talk to defend ourselves. I'm a union rep from Unite. So we took probably about 2 months fighting for it, but we're on strike right now. As you can see the video, we're doing well. But I heard the news, don't know if it's true or not, they're trying to bring people from other council to do our job. So I don't know how good is that, how fair is that, but I told that people already, if they come, the day they do their strike, we're gonna go there do their job as well. So or we support each other, or we stand by the side. It's a culture of bullying, intimidation, and we have new managers starting on the Monday coming. Is already threatening people. You know, that's Newham for you. I can't even believe it's a labor council. You know, the people supposed to be with the workers. The people supposed to be defending the workers. And I believe everyone can see on the news, most of the strikes these days, at least in councils, are Labor's government. You know, they're the one running the council. So how do they with the workers or against the workers? I'm kind of lost here. I need help with that. I try my best to help my colleagues. Tomorrow going to be our last day for the strike. It's the first week we're done. If we don't get what we want, or at least close to what we want, we're going to have another 2 weeks to go. But like I said, they're trying to bring people from other boroughs to do our job. Because they tried with the agency people, it didn't work because they got no experience. They don't know where the bins are. They don't know the keys. They're losing too much time. Probably they're doing half what we do in a day. And anyway, it's not like all the team they're covering. They're just covering probably main roads. You know, the main roads where the people going past and see. Because when you go side roads, you will see the mess. But still, they're bringing others from other council because of course they got experience. It's still not going to be good enough, but it will be better than where they go right now. We're going to try to fight it. We're going to try to fight it, see what's going to come out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Enrique. We've got Dennis Karabot and Alex Owoladi with us as well from Newham. So I've just asked if anyone's got any questions for the Newham team about the action and how we can support you. So
sorry, can we have Dennis speak next? Do a short thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then I'll say some yucca.
Yeah. All right. A few words from each of you then. That would be great. Dennis, where are you? There you are. Are you gonna start your video, Dennis?
Hello, I'd like to say it's been an interesting.
Yeah, hello again. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name's Dennis. I'm an ex-employee from Newham. I'm working at Tower Hamlets at the moment. I'm helping the guys. I've fought with them at ACAS to try and get their terms and condition put back. Over the years, we've had changes of contracts, overtime rates lowered, night shift moved, shift patterns changed. The guys have really felt the pinch. It's just cuts after cuts, and now they're offering us pay rises of things that we had already. Newham is one of the worst paid boroughs compared to its neighbours. I mean, it's a difference of between £3,000 and £5,000 on each job, which is a hell of a difference compared to where we are in this day and age. You know, we're fighting. We've got stronger and stronger. We've got a lot more support now than we had, and I believe that we will fight this and we will win this. And this will only make us stronger, and hopefully it will show others that if we can do it, others can do it, and you know, they'll join us and we'll join them. And ideally what we'd like is 32 boroughs all joined together, and when we have a dispute, we all come out together, because you know, that's what we need. We need a union for just the dust and the cleansing, and I believe it would make us a lot stronger. And when others like yourselves would be having difficulties, we could join your dispute. And, you know, as a majority, I believe united, we can do much more than we can do alone. You know, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Dennis. Solidarity. Thank you for that message. And over to you, Alex, as well.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Alex. I'm a Unite community member. I also represented a number of the workers in Newham over the last 4 years who were standing against the bullying and harassment. And it's been a great honor. And what's very clear as well in the way that management are using and abusing the workers is really using racial discrimination. You know, people who have spoken up against racist bullying. One mother of one loader said her son was treated like a field slave, and he was sacked when he made a complaint and sacked on the spot. This is what Newham Council has been doing. And what's really significant is that that it seems like, if you check, that the refuge workers across the country are kind of in the forefront. There's strikes of refuge workers all over the country, and it's no accident. They are, you know, the lowest paid, but it's also the most militant. And a lot of, particularly in the major cities, there's a high proportion of Black and Asian and immigrant workers, and really is significant. In Newham, we're trying to organize getting community support as well. So I'm also a member of Men for Justice by Any Means Necessary, which is an immigrant rights organization. And it's very clear, we were marching through Newham yesterday, which was really great. And it was really clear how much that community, particularly the immigrant community, was so supportive. And I think one of the things we've got to do is, the management are trying to use divide and rule, same as the government, and it is a political struggle now, and we need to be on our side, making sure that we are fighting against all sorts of discrimination in the workplace to unite us, and that's really important. And I think the role of particularly Black and Asian and immigrant workers in the labour movement is very significant, and they are really very an important factor. So I just like to say, you know, it's been the Newham strikes are really an example for everyone. And what we'll do is we've got a relatives group now to organise a relative, so they can actually organise to get support in the community for their loved ones who are the workers. And that's a good model we should be organising in other disputes as well. It was, you know, remember the miners' strike? I was just about old enough to remember that. And it was the miners' wives that organised, and it really made a difference. And because it is a struggle, not just of those workers, but their families. You know what I mean? So that's the last thing I want to say, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. And we have got we've got members of the Socialist Labour Network in Newham who are organising there, organising on the ground within the community. And it's important that we all join up, and we'll get all those details circulated so that you can all contact each other. And we're going to take the local organising issue a little bit further now, because we've got Richard Brenner with 4 comrades from different parts of the country who are organising in different ways in their local communities. We've got Stephen Foster, we've got Stuart Halferty, we've got Dave Hill, and we've got Len Arthur, who are joining us with Richard. So Richard, I'm going to hand over chairing the panel to you now. Welcome, comrade.
Thanks very much, and what a meeting it's been so far. There's been so many comments that have made about the importance of local organising and about the importance of uniting the different forces in the working class and socialist movement and fighting back. And there's been talk about Iran and popular assemblies and the need for people to stick together and support one another. And so really what SLN Socialist Labour Network decided to do jointly with the network of shadow constituency Labour parties was to write to all of the organisations that are fighting back in Britain. We wrote to Acorn, we wrote to People's Assembly, we wrote to the RMT, the UCU, we wrote to the CWU, and we proposed that we all come together in local anti-price rise unions in every town and city across the country. A sort of form of that idea appeared to already have taken shape. We saw the CWU and Acorn launching Enough is Enough at a national level. We saw the new Don't Pay campaign springing apparently out of nowhere, organised by people that we don't know, who called on people not to pay. We see the Enough is Enough group calling for supporting the strikes and fighting for a freeze on prices, a freeze on rents, and above inflation pay rises everywhere. But what we didn't see until very recently was the actual emergence of the local groups that we have proposed. So actually seeing them start to come into shape on the ground. They're not the people's assemblies that a man has proposed that could form an alternative power base in society and maybe one day the basis for a working class government in Britain, but they are signs of working class people coming together from a range of different organisations and taking action, including some of them taking shape quite fast. What I'd like to do, if it's possible, is if we could have the have all of the speakers from those groups, Len, Steve, Stuart, and Dave on screen, as it were. That would be really great. That's good. So we're spotlighting multiple people. That's really good. And if we could, I just wanted to ask Steve first of all, and then others, about what inspired you to take the initiative locally in forming a local group. Steve, you started a group in Leicester, which appeared to grow very, very fast indeed. Can you tell us what inspired you to do that?
Well, there's two things really. There's the Enough is Enough group that's set up in Leicester. I can't claim any responsibility for leading that, but I've been involved from the beginning. And it's just obviously that it's important that we all work together. And what's been really amazing, as you've just said, Richard, is the actual growth, the speed of the growth. I mean, we set this group up about 2 weeks ago, and just as a couple of examples of how quickly it's grown, we've now got more than 700 followers on our Facebook page. And at the first initial organizing meeting last week, more than 50 people turned up. So it's that speed of growth and the number of different kinds of organizations and interests that it covers and how it covers the whole city. So I think that's really, really interesting and important. And then I focused, we might come on to this, I focused more on leading the inflation tracker price rises element of Enough is Enough.
Yeah, well, can you tell? I mean, you mentioned that. Can you just tell us a bit more about that? That's one of the things that Leicester Enough is doing, yeah?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the first things we've done as it's part of the overall initiative is we set up a Leicester Enough is Enough inflation tracking group. It's a rather long title, but basically what we decided to do is we work with 1 or 2 local food banks, asked them if they could give us a list of the most commonly requested and used items from the food banks. And then I just put a call out, said I was happy to lead that piece of work, got some volunteers to say they'd help me, and we're now up and running. In fact, we've been gathering more data today. And what we've done is we're focusing on 3 main shops, Aldi, Co-op and Tesco's. We have 12 items that we're tracking the price of. And once a month, at the end of the month, we're going to record the price of each of those items. And then we can give the inflation rate for the city of Leicester for those items as a basket of goods for the month. So our first figure will hopefully be on the 1st of October for September, which means that also we can track the price of each individual item across shops. We can track the price of a basket of goods in each shop. And then obviously we can work out the inflation rates, and then we can do it overall for the city as a general figure to see what the real inflation rate is for ordinary people here in the city. And then we're planning to issue our first press release on the 30th of September to link with a day of action that's happening in the city the following day on the 1st of October.
And who's involved in the campaign then, Steve? Have you got local organisations that are involved, or is it all just individuals?
At the moment, it's mainly just individuals, and it's all going so fast it's hard to keep up. I know, for instance, Unite Community Branch this week at their branch meeting agreed unanimously to support Enough is Enough, for example. And we're trying to work, one of the actions we're doing on 1st of October, we're trying to work with the Bakers Union, because there's an ongoing campaign there at the one of the biggest employers in Leicester, Samworth Brothers, to unionize and get union recognition. Enough is Enough is planning on working with the Bakers Union to leaflet and the workers outside that factory. And then we're doing a day of action on the 1st of October in the city centre, and in the morning of the 1st of October in the local communities on some of the estates, just to raise the issues of the key demands. So it's largely individuals, but the way it's going, I'm sure more and more organisations are going to be joining in with it.
It sounds like it. You've had contact from Acorn as well, I understand.
Yes, I haven't personally, but yes, there have been discussions. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Stuart, yeah, I mean, your campaign's emerged in a slightly different way in Nottingham, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean, we've just been involved in a Save Nottingham Libraries campaign, which is on the cusp of success, and part of that involved intense work in local areas, and I emphasize intense because I do watch what Acorn do online. And when you get involved in a campaign to save libraries in a working class area, you can't stop. You know, the campaign develops a very fast rhythm, and so we, you know, now that we're approaching success on that, we're keen to try to replicate that around the cost of living crisis, so with many more people and using the online tools that are available to organize people, but involving going into local areas, knocking on doors if necessary, putting leaflets through doors, because, you know, with social media, one of the things I've noticed, we during the People's Assembly campaign, the first burst in 2013, we used a thing called Nation Builder, which used IP addresses to plot out on a map where your supporters were. And what we realized was that we had about, initially about 1,500 email addresses, and they were concentrated in the middle class parts of Nottingham. And there were these deserts in St. Anne's and Meadows, which are the poorest, some of the poorest parts of the country, in fact. And the way that you have to get to those people, because they're not within those left networks that we exist in, is you need to go into those areas and talk to people and let them know who you are and what you're doing, and leafleting can be a great way of doing that. But I have been following because Nottingham's a, you know, sister city to Leicester, so I've been following very closely what they've been doing. We just haven't been able to replicate their success as yet. But we're meeting on Tuesday to begin that process. But it's inspiring. It sort of feels like cheating to see what Leicester have done and see what works and go, I would just copy them then.
Yeah, it's not cheating, it's combined and uneven developments. Great history in the movement. Can I? You've had a pots and pans protest, was it, or was that Nottingham? How did that go?
I mean, you know, amongst comrades, it went very well. It got some media attention, but it wasn't enormous. And whilst I think it you know, what I realized was that people are happy to bang pots and pans together for 45 minutes to an hour. I thought people might be a bit shy or embarrassed, you know, being English, but people are very happy to do it. Would I do it again? Possibly not. I mean, what works in Latin America might not work here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that Leicester were planning to do is to protest at a local energy company. Dave, you've had again coming from a slightly different direction in Brighton. It's a Don't Pay group, isn't it, in Brighton? Don't Pay UK. Dave, you're on mute. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, it's a Don't Pay movement, and it's had extraordinary quick growth and success, and it's only been going about 2 to 3 weeks. Stalls, leafleting, press releases, a stunt or two, and a public meeting last Tuesday. Between 150 and 170 people came. Now, there is good news about Don't Pay UK, but there's also cautionary tales. And the good news is that it is extremely well organised at a national level. It's a model of how to organise, the advice given on their national website. And locally, they seem to be, I say they, we, seem to be extremely well organised. I think people are a bit taken aback by the speed of which, but I'm not taken aback. This thing's going to grow and grow. That's the upside. The downside is that Don't Pay UK is single issue. And a lot of the people involved at the organising level in Brighton come from a very different tradition, an anarchist tradition, and they object to concepts of leadership, object to concepts of programme, and object strongly to us putting forward what our man was suggesting, very importantly, that we must put the socialist perspective. And they don't seem to like that. On the other hand, you know, let a thousand flowers bloom. And this is organic development. And one good thing, I see that the local Don't Pay UK have approached a number of other local organisations regarding a demonstration outside the TUC. As for the future, yeah, we've got another public meeting coming up, October the 12th. We've got organising meetings, umpteen WhatsApp groups. So that the good news is the intense energy and the way that, and other comrades will have experienced this, the way that people are approaching us, snatching leaflets out of our hands when we've got stalls. They're interested and they're upset and they're angry. And the final point I'll make at this point is that people who don't want to broaden it into bigger issues, well, you just look back, you know, 1926, the general strike, the anti-Nazi League, the miners' strike, in Brighton, a very successful coalition against the cuts 10 years ago, 50 organisations involved. You can't stop people working together, and you can't stop people raising questions, and you certainly can't stop us raising questions of socialism and a socialist analysis and a socialist programme.
Well, thanks very much, Dave. It's very inspiring. Len, your experience in Cardiff, again, I imagine slightly different from the way things are taking shape in other cities, but also some similarities.
Yeah. First of all, I'm speaking on behalf of People's Assembly Wales, not just Cardiff.
Oh, right.
Don't worry. Adam, who you did ask to speak, first of all, is the Cardiff organiser, but he is actually occupying outside Ofgem at this very moment as we speak. So I've been drafted in in his stead. Really, this often happens. I'm the older one with not very mobile. So, and he's the younger active one. And anyway, there you go. No, just to say that it is different, but you know, similarities and differences. The in a sense, People's Assembly Wales has been going since 2014. We're quite different to People's Assembly that exists elsewhere in England and Scotland, in the sense that we've because we have Welsh government, and because that Welsh government is Labour controlled, and has now entered into a cooperation agreement with Plaid, which is quite a radical agreement, but actually needs a lot of pressure behind it in order to speed up implementation and also radicalize a lot of the policies, and that's what we're trying to do. So in a sense, we're in a different political environment and a different political context, but one which we're very conscious of not only putting forward alternative policies and being more political in what we do, but also in the sense of arguing that the Welsh Government should use its powers to the utmost, even as far as a constitutional crisis, to challenge the Tory government on a whole range of issues. And so in a sense, what I've tried to do is that I've posted a number of links, because obviously there's not much, and there's not a huge amount. I could speak for hours, I expect, as everybody else could as well. But I've posted a lot of links so that you can see what we've been up to over the time. But more recently, around the cost of living crisis, we've just launched today, actually, our cost of living crisis petition, which has a series of demands which go politically much further probably than enough is enough, and don't pay and so on, and make the links given the context we're in. And that has the support of 100 people across the left in Wales, including Beth Winter MP, Helith Vachen, who's Senedd member, that's our Welsh Parliament member, and a number of trade union leaders, Socialist Workers' Party, Left Unity, Labour Party activists, and so on. And in the sense that those 100 people are asking people of Wales to now sign this petition, and we're hoping to use this as a vehicle, in a sense, to give some focus, to bring to enough is enough, and don't pay, and people power, and other groups on a local level, to do the sort of things you're talking about. And just to say that we've also, we just recently, where I live in the bottom of the Rhondda here, in near Llantrisant in Wales, we recently, 2 years ago, our local A&E was faced with effective closure, and we organised and had a very similar response to what other people are saying, is that within 5 days of the announcement, we had a demonstration at the health board with 700 people, and we essentially marched in as the public and occupied it. And within 2 weeks had a Facebook group of 22,000 people. And the uprising was such that within 6 months, together with political support in the Senate, we won. And all the appointments that needed to be made to keep the A&E open were done. So we in addition to trying to coordinate things, we also are very active on a local level. And how we manage this in Wales, and it's quite interesting in terms of what Amanda, and this is my last point, is that we meet every other Monday night online, and have done so for about 3 years. These meetings are open meetings where anybody on the left, obviously we don't want Tories turning up, but it is a meeting to network, because Wales is very difficult to meet up because of the geography. It's quicker to get from Cardiff to London than it is from Wrexham to Cardiff, for example. And we meet these open meetings every fortnight, and they vary in size from 5 or 6 over a holiday period to 20 when there's a big issue, and so on. And they're pretty representative of everybody in Wales. And we supplement these with a messenger group, which is active 24/7 basically, and follows through decisions and campaigning issues, and shares information about what's going on. And because of that openness, non-sectarian openness across the left, but also with a political cutting edge, if you like, in terms of demands, and particularly with the cooperation agreement, we've been able to stimulate a whole rate, help build. No, it's not just, it's wrong to say lead as such. It's helping to form and support local groups and action across Wales. and to just keep people informed of what's going on. So yeah, I think that's it as much as I can in a
Thanks very
condensed
much. Thanks very much, Len.
version. But please have a look at some of the links I put up.
Will do, and I'm sure everybody else will too. Look, I mean, this has been really, really interesting. And what we're getting from people is some of you have set up groups where they haven't existed. Others are in very new initiatives like Don't Pay. Others of you have had a small or a significant People's Assembly group previously, but you haven't had the opportunity to connect quite as vigorously with the mass movement until now, and have done so with the growth of the cost of living campaign. But you know, you're kind of catching things on the up. What changes do you need to make to the way politics is normally done to be able to really make sure that, as the question that was put earlier in the Q&A put it, that you actually engage with a wide layer of ordinary people? Because we're not talking, are we, about the usual circles of the British left and far left, or even the usual circles of trade union militants in the public and private sector. We're talking about a situation in which over 500,000 people signed up to Enough is Enough in a matter of days, in which a majority of the population, when polled, support the demands that Enough is Enough is putting forward, where people are about to, people are already really hungry and about to get really cold and really ill, and desperate and angry, and there's a mood also of defiance. You can see it, as well as potentially despair. How are we going to change our whole way of doing things, the whole culture, use this opportunity to not just to reach out, but to build really mass local organizations of struggle? And what in your immediate experience and what in your thinking has to change for that? Len has whacked his hand straight up there. You want to go first, then Dave.
Yeah, just to quickly say, I've come up with it, and I'm sure I've read it in Gramsci or somewhere else, but I was in an argument, having a discussion, trying to encapsulate a change of mood and a change of feeling last week, and I come up with this phrase, spontaneous radicalism. That what seems to be happening is that people are experiencing this crisis so sharply, so badly, so deeply, that when you, it's a bit like what Man was saying about Iran, that when you, when an issue comes up about energy, for example, energy prices, people immediately are almost saying that, what's the government doing about this? It's about profiteering. So people who might otherwise have been wary about making broader statements, I'm finding on the street, generally, in any debate about this, that subject is almost immediately being politically generalized to the wider context in terms of profiteering and in terms of the state. And that's what I mean by spontaneous radicalism. And I think that just by, people talk about single issues and stuff, but just by raising those issues, you cannot avoid then getting into a political debate about what can be done about it. People raise it straight away within 3 or 4 sentences. Well, what can be done about it then? What can we do? And, is it just enough to do this? And so I think that the grounds are there spontaneously for us to link into, but we do need political demands. We need a political program in order to take that forward.
Thanks very much, Len. Dave, I think you were the next in the rush of hands there.
Yes. We're all rushing in. I think the support the miners groups and the poll tax, anti-poll tax union were a marvellous model. And one thing that is happening in Brighton with the Don't Pay UK, I've expressed my reservations about that. But one thing that it is doing, it's setting up a number of local groups in the localities within the town. Yeah. And that's what's happened in some areas in the anti-poll tax struggle and in the miners' struggle. And so I think that's what we've got to do. There's no point in relying on the Labour Party. Obviously, the far left grouplets are absent from what's going on to a large extent. And that's quite a new development, isn't it, in British protest movements? So that's the first thing I want to say. The other thing I want to say is to pick up on this defiance. I happen to be, as well as a supporter of the tribune effects of parliamentary democracy, a great believer in direct action. Huge believer in direct action, having taken part, blah, blah, as most of us have in various actions. And I think that we need, people are so angry. I'll just give a quote from Lenin. Lenin had a wonderful quote. There are decades when nothing happens. There are weeks when decades happen. And those weeks are upon us. And the anger is such, we know from our political histories in the estates and in working class communities in particular, that people get very angry and they say, you know, sod the law, sod what's going on. And so I think we should think about occupations of the energy companies. I think we also need to, I wonder if MI5 will come knocking at my door for saying this. I think we need to consider the role of the media and how to stop it. Okay, one more thing, final thing is the raising, to repeat what a number of comrades have said, is about the raising, the permanent raising of the, in language people can understand, as well as for our more highfalutin groups, raising the political, the socialist demands.
Thanks very much indeed, Dave. Interesting stuff. And I'm reminded that when The Sun printed a front page about Arthur Scargill, in which it tried to suggest that he was a Nazi, because they caught a quick frame photograph of him with his arm out and rigged it to make it look like he was, you know, doing one of those old Nazi salutes. The print workers realized what was going on and they refused to print it, and they had to print a whole edition of the Sun newspaper with just the front page saying, you know, the trade unions wouldn't let us print the front page that we wanted to. So I remember I had it cut out on my wall for the rest of the dispute because it reminded me of the power of the workers. And you know, in a way, aren't we? You talk about the miners' strike, you talk about the poll tax. This is like potentially like all of those sort of mixed up together, with different sectors of workers out on strike, with people not wanting to pay, with people unable to pay, with people desperate and angry. Stuart, what's your take on how we can connect with this?
Well, I love the fact that just as I was writing my little notes of what to say and put yellow vest at the top, people started posting about the yellow vest in the chat, because it is true that we didn't have a yellow vest movement. And it is also true that in my optimism of the will, I organised one of the few yellow vest protests outside of, you know, in England. It was fine for Nottingham. 100 people came. It was the coldest hour of the coldest day of the coldest of the year. It didn't take off. I mean, I started reading about 1848 thinking we were entering into the springtime of the peoples, but for whatever reason it didn't happen. But I do think, though, you know, the fact that the British press went all out to convince people that there were fascists involved in the yellow vests, and there were, but there were also many left-wingers involved in the yellow vest movement in France. The fact that the British press went out of its way to do that shows that they were concerned, that the elite were concerned that this movement would spread to Britain. And of course, we see that in France, their energy costs have risen only slightly. I mean, there are other reasons for that. They have nuclear power stations more than we do. But Britain has gone through, in the last 20 years, a number of serious institutional crises. I mean, the police are utterly discredited. Our parliamentarians are utterly discredited as expenses stealing bandits. You know, the sort of the level of the crisis in Britain, I think, is so significant that you know, that people have been beaten down over 40 years so much that it's not the case that we can rely on institutions that have existed for a century. That, you know, they've been smashed up. I think, I mean, I welcome the end of the sectarian left, and I do think it has happened. And I think there are probably a number of reasons for that. First of all, the length of the human lifespan means that a lot of their leaders who emerged in the 1950s and 60s are now dying off. But crucially, it's the rise of the internet and the ability for us, when there's a scandal in one of these organizations, and there always is, because any organization that has the same leader, male leader, usually for 50 years, there will be scandals, and they were covered up for decades. And then all of a sudden, the SWP being the most high profile one, this stuff emerges onto the internet, and they can't hide it anymore. They can't just expel a branch or expel a bunch of women and, you know, and pretend it never happened. So so I think that those types of organizations are now gone and will not return. They will continue to exist, but they'll never grow to a large size. Look, we live at a sort of a revolutionary moment. We've gone through a revolution in communicative affairs, whereby, you know, for years, centuries, we went through the revolutions that the printing press created, you know, whether it was the collapse of the Catholic Church or, you know, whatever that followed. For hundreds of years, we've watched as the march of the printing press through Europe transformed the world that we live in. We are just in the early days, the first 50 years of the rise of the internet and what that will transform. And the way it was put to me, the best way I heard it explained was that all, you know, printing to start with, and then radio and television and everything else, were all one-to-many forms of communication. You know, one person wrote a book, many people read it. One person made a television program, many people watched it. The internet, what makes it revolutionary is it's a many-to-many communication form. So we can all speak, and you know, the capitalists will say, oh, well, there's conspiracy theories in the internet. Well, there was only one conspiracy theory for a long time, and that was the one that the BBC and the capitalist press told us. And now that anybody can put out a conspiracy theory, many of which are true, most of which are not, they're panicked, and rightly so. And so we should, as socialists, recognize that this new technology that is emerging, that we're now benefiting, you know, we're on a little television channel all of our own, having a panel show, and I've enjoyed it all night, and I'll be coming back to the next one and all subsequent ones. That is enormously significant. And on that, I just want to tell comrades about something that we've discovered quite recently. Not discovered, it's existed for a long time. It's called Reddit. Now, you may have heard of it in relation to the far right and the incel movement, these nasty right-wing little boys and men. That was a problem for Reddit 10 years ago because it allows anything on it. But those Nazis have now moved on to 4chan, 8chan, now Telegram, and they've disappeared. But Reddit itself is, in Nottingham, for example, which is a city, and I'll be generous, it's a city of a maximum of about 350,000 people. There is one subreddit about Nottingham which contains 56,000 people. And they are real people. There, you know, there's no benefit to setting up, you know, lots of little Reddit accounts, and well, there's a little bit of a benefit, but many of them are students, and Nottingham's a student city. And before they come, they go into the Nottingham subreddit and they ask, where should I live? What's it like? But for our Pots and Pans protest, we went around street leafleting and tried to you know, break down areas into little bits you could do in 50 minutes. And, you know, it's a project that will complete over the coming years. But I went into this subreddit, which I check from time to time, and there was a comment about our protest, not posted by me or anybody I know. And then I read down the comments, and further down, there was a link to a previous comment from a couple of weeks ago that was a picture of my leaflet, our leaflet, on someone's floor saying, did anyone get this through the door? And another entire discussion about the content of the leaflet that I personally had missed. So I just want people to be aware that, you know, it's a strange thing to go on what's effectively a new social network. But, you know, given that we're all activists, I thought I should try and get that across to you. So sorry, I've gone on too long, but those
No, thanks very much, Stuart, and a very different angle on things, which makes all of this completely invaluable. Steve, where's it going, and what are you going to do?
Right, in 1 minute, there's a number of things, but because we're leaderless, but some of us who are involved are trying to encourage certain things. One is self-action. If somebody says, why don't we do a leaflet? We say, good idea. Why don't you get some people together and do the leaflet? Yeah. Another thing, look at all the channels. We're doing face-to-face, so we're doing leaflets, we're going out into the estates, but we're not just relying on Facebook because that's a certain demographic, certain age. So we're looking at Instagram, we're looking at some of the other things, we're looking at Twitter. Another thing we're looking at is producing videos instead of written leaflets, because we think a lot of people these days will watch videos. So I think the question for us is, we don't want the old hacks taking it all over. We want people active themselves. And so far, we're having a lot of success. I'm not saying it's going to carry on like that, but one of the things we really want is to draw in new people, especially younger people, and show them that they can do things and just don't sit around waiting for people like us to do it for them.
Thank you so much, Steve. Look, I'm going to try and draw this to a close. I know that we've got a group that's going to be formed in Hull. I know in Newham, they had a fantastic meeting. I was talking to comrades today about setting that up. I know people in Hastings that are trying to get something organised. And I'm sure there are loads more of these things that I just don't know the first thing about. But we're trying to get people together. At the moment, the coordination is all being done from the top down by the national organizations that have come together. That's great, but we also need coordination at the base. And you don't need me, after you heard what Aman had to say, to spell out why that's important, not just to organize our day-to-day work, but also as part of our strategy to build a working class movement that is capable of running society. And therefore, what I was going to suggest is that the four groups that are represented here tonight form a joint platform, or some sort of social media platform that other local groups can connect with, so that we have horizontal connection between the groups as well as vertical connection between the groups, which I think will be absolutely important for sharing ideas, but also for keeping the struggle going in difficult times. And really what I wanted with the last question, and please very, very, very brief answers, is, to those of us that don't have local groups in our borough or our town or our city, what would your brief advice be? What should we do next?
Well, I would say join the Leicester Enough is Enough Facebook group and look how they do it, because that's been quite inspiring to me. And just, keep in touch with other people. Feel free to ask questions of people who've done it before. And just follow what you think, because we all do things differently. Or as Tony Greenstein says in the chat, set one up, which I think is an excellent slogan for all of us. Anybody else on?
What I think should happen, is that okay?
Yeah,
you
go on.
can hear. What I think should happen is that in localities, and it's a shame this hasn't happened in Brighton, that some people should invite Enough is Enough, Don't Pay UK, CWU, local trades councils, different organisations in each town or city or village, and say, let's get together, let's call it a organising meeting, let's get something going, and sure, then we can do all the things that we've been doing for 10, 20, 30 years, including the new social media and leaflet to advertise the meeting. And I would think that in every city you'll get 200-300 people turning up at that initial organising, non-sectarian meeting, and it can be under the umbrella of anti-austerity or whatever people decide on the night.
That's brilliant. And we've got a draft letter that we've sent out to all SLN members, a draft letter that you can adapt, you can use it, and you can send it out to all local organisations, to your Unite community branch, to your CWU, to Acorn, to all of the local organisations, inviting them to a meeting, or you can just set one up and invite them in your own way. Thanks very much, everybody. Len, you've got one last comment you wanted to make.
Just to add to what they were saying, I think it's very important that wherever you are, that you know how people locally communicate in terms of social media. It could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, it could be Reddit or whatever. And it's very, very important that you make sure that what you do locally is known through that social media, whatever it is. I think it's very important that happens, because we want to move away, I think, from the trades councils and so on. They're all very laudable organisations. But I think we need to appeal straight to people who are really, we need to appeal to that spontaneous radicalism, if you like, and start to mobilise that.
So many ideas we've heard tonight. I can't believe it. From Iran, from Sri Lanka, from two groups of striking workers, and from you. Back to Esther, but thanks very much all of you for coming. Let's stay in touch, and hopefully the next time we try to coordinate a number of different groups horizontally, there won't be 4 of you, there'll be 12 of you, then 20 of you, then 100, then 500, and we'll have, like with the minor support committees conference, or the All Britain Anti-Poll Tax Federation, or the Councils of Action that we had in 1920 that stopped them sending weapons to the to fight against the the Russian Revolution, we'll be able to have a real mass workers' organisation on the ground. Back to Esther, and thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, comrades. I think it's been really good this evening that we haven't had top-down orators. We've had people on the ground who are doing stuff, and it's wonderful to hear. We will try to we will coordinate from the SLN steering committee and pull together a lot of the information that we've had this evening, communicate it to everyone who's been to this meeting and to all of our SLN members. We'll get that group going. Richard, maybe we can include a man in Chatura in that as well. So thank you very much for coming this evening. We look forward to seeing you at another meeting, and please join the Socialist Labour Network. Thank you, comrades. Have a great weekend.